The beautiful thing is, when you start moving into the equity game, you are evolving what you're doing inside of your business. Because private equity is the thing that helps generate and build companies. It's the thing that helps generate and create jobs. And also, it's everything in the world, folks.
Welcome to the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast, the ultimate destination for accredited investors and entrepreneurs seeking alternative wealth-building strategies. Discover how to fast-track your journey to wealth and time freedom by thinking outside the box. If you're ready to join the ranks of the Contrarian Capitalists and learn the most effective ways to reach your financial goals faster, you're in the right place. Let's get started with today's episode of the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast.
Thank you for joining another episode of the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast. I am here, your favorite silverback, Sylvania Harrod, and on today's episode, I want to talk to you about a guy who fundamentally transformed millions of people's lives, in my life in general. He was one of my favorite authors, is out there making impact, and was kind of the North Star of what's driven me to chase after the desires I want to. It is about the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Tony Robbins. So, for those of you who are not familiar with Tony Robbins is an international bestseller. He has written numerous different New York Times bestsellers and international bestsellers, and he is primarily known as a coach. His main company, the Anthony Robbins companies, are proclaimed to have around $7 billion in combined revenue, thousands of employees all over, and he's been impacting and transforming people's lives since the 80s. So you got 40 plus years of doing things. And so I remember when I first got introduced to Tony Robbins, it was on his first book, which is called Unleash the Power Within. I remember it because I just remember after reading that book, I would listen to the audiobook every day during my commute for close to a year, guys. It was like every day I listened to it, go through that process. But as I always do on the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast, I like to reveal the things that has helped him accelerate towards that. Because while I do believe mindset is great, I believe having information and access is even better. Because there's information everywhere, but if you don't have the correct information, you cannot make the most tactical decision. Because Tony Robbins, especially with his growth that he transpired post 2010 and beyond, it fundamentally transformed his business. But what was the rocket ship that really helped it? And if you listen to any of the other podcasts in different episodes, you know that it comes down to, is he backed by a fund or is he not? So Tony Robbins just recently released a book called The Holy Grail of Investing. It is one of the best books I've ever written. I didn't write it. I've ever read. It's one of those that you get to understand some of these fundamental terms. And he is the first person that I found that has begun to shed light on the world of private equity. But at the same time, the book is an extremely well-written sales letter to his company, Kaz Investments. Now, I'd be curious to see, which I'm pretty sure, knowing his structure and how he determined how he did the book, if he's a general partner inside of Kaz Investments. My guess would say yes. But if we look at the backing of what he did, he was the first person of public notoriety in the coaching world that did this thing called an LP equity agreement inside of these companies. So he talks about having over 100 companies that he's directly partnered with. And he has 100 companies that do $7 billion in revenue is what he talks about constantly there. But what he does have is that in order to work with Tony Robbins one-on-one, you have to, it's a minimum fee, as it was a few years ago, of $1 million. And he gets equity in the percentage of growth he helps deliver for your business. So what does that mean? That means that he is invested into companies that he's pouring into. The other thing is, that is the first entry point of being in the world of private equity. Private equity just means that you are a firm that holds ownership stakes in multiple different companies that are private. So that means that they're not publicly traded. So if you went and you happened to coach 10 companies that they were able to give you equity stakes into their company and you had a percentage of the growth that was there, that is the basis of getting into private equity. So I go all around the country and on different podcasts, and I tell coaches and consultants exactly how they can do that process. Because the beautiful thing is that when you start moving into the equity game, you are evolving what you're doing inside of your business. Because private equity is the thing that helps generate and build companies. It's the thing that helps generate and create jobs, and also influence everything in the world, folks. You know that I talk about that all the time. So we're going to look at Tony Robbins' business. We look at it and say 100 companies. The first question you got to ask yourself is, how in the hell do you directly operate 100 companies? And then you start to understand you don't. You have different leaders in place. You have different people in place. And if you're playing the equity game, you no longer are the parent of a small child. You're more like the parent of an adult child who's out there doing the things they need you to do. You give them pointers, you give them guidance, you share things periodically, but you're not mainly responsible for making sure that they go to the bathroom and feed themselves and do those type of items. That's the difference between being an investor versus being an operator. If you look at the rooms that Tony Robbins has access to, you got to ask yourself this question: how the hell did you get access to that? And if we look at his primary business, we know that that's a loss leader. It's a loss leader because the thing and the primary objective of doing that is actually to do what? It's to find higher tier clients that you then have the opportunity to that have understood your fundamental system and your process. Because what Tony Robbins did is he tested his thesis around how to impact and change the human. Can impacting and changing a human change their performance and what they do? The answer is overwhelmingly yes. Why do you think sports teams are able to ping them in? Peter Gruber, who's a gentleman that owns the one of the owners of the Golden State Warriors. You think Tony Robbins doesn't have a stake inside of there? Google it, look it up. You'll realize that there's a reason why he's on the sidelines for those different types of items, why he's able to be there. And you start seeing it. And my objective is that if I open your eyes to things, you can see the world for what it is, not what you want it to be. And just like in life, you take that principle and you put it in life, and you just see things for what it is, not for what you want it to be. You now have awareness and clarity of how you can actually play the game. And so for those of you that are out there and you are an operator, I'm here to tell you there's a big difference between being an operator and being an investor. An operator wants to control everything. An investor creates a thesis. You create a profile of what you choose to invest in and what you choose not to invest in. And once you find that, think about that, how it impacts you and your clientele. If you never ask yourself the 4 questions that I've mentioned in previous episodes of but the 4th one being the most important thing is how much time do you want to spend? You don't know how to invest your time because you don't really know, okay, there's no barometers. You don't have any boundaries. That's the word I was looking for. You have no boundaries. And so as you look at those boundaries, you can be able to determine these are the benchmark of what I say hell yes to, and these are the things that I say hell no to. And so once you determine that, you can empower yourself to operate like Tony Robbins does. Because what he realized is that I can only coach so many people one-on-one. My income is capped based upon time. I'm pouring so much value into these companies that they're growing by billions upon billions of dollars. Why not tie yourself to the return of the outcomes from the tools and systems you're sharing in the world? If you're in a place where you're a marketing coach and you're helping people be able to grow their sales and channels organization, by the way, people, you should be getting a piece of the outcomes that you're determining. This is the basis of how the legal world works. You do enough good, you bring enough value to a firm, they make you a partner. Once you make partner, you take a piece into what the organization does from the moment you became a partner and on. same rules. Take that, you can implement that into your current business structure. Because just like Tony Robbins did, I hope by the end of this podcast you realize, damn, I've been thinking too small. So I'm going to tell you, it's actually much harder to think small than it is to think big. Because if you look at the law of averages, 95% of people are going to think small. It may be 99% of people are going to think small, which means you're in a red ocean. But if you move over to a blue ocean, which is the 1%, you're on the side of thinking bigger. But you can't think big if you don't have the proper vehicle. Proper vehicle that you need is private equity. So for all of you that follow me on multiple different social media channels, you can find me at Sylvania Harrod. It's my first name. It's not even last name. It's first name, last name. And I'm on Instagram, on Facebook. I don't do the TikToks yet, maybe one day, but I'm here to help you. I'm here to support you. I hope this episode was of value to you. And as always, if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out. If there's any errors, feel free to reach out. I'm always willing to go in and see what data points you can be able to provide. I appreciate all you. I'm very grateful. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more people ready to explore contrarian investment strategies. Stay connected with us on social media for more expert insights, behind-the-scenes content, and updates on upcoming episodes. You can find all the links in the show notes. Until next time, stay bold, think differently, and keep pursuing the legacy you deserve. Thanks for listening to the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast.